Imagine a world where giants roamed, their footsteps shaking the earth, their shadows stretching across mountains. In the land of Bashan, one such giant reigned a king so immense his bed was forged of iron, over 13 feet long, not for comfort but to proclaim a pride that rivaled the heavens. His name was Og, king of Bashan, a colossus whose name struck fear into nations, whose fortresses stood like stone sentinels against the sky. Yet at the edge of the promised land, this titan fell not to swords, not to armies, but to a force he could neither see nor comprehend. This is the story of Og, the last of the Rephaim, a giant who dared to defy Moses and the God of Israel. But it's more than a tale of ancient battles. It's a journey into a world of spiritual strongholds, cosmic clashes, and timeless truths. Why does Scripture preserve the detail of Og's iron bed? What secrets lie buried in Bashan's ruins? And what can the fall of a giant teach us today about facing our own towering challenges? Join us as we unravel this epic saga through history, archaeology, and faith. This is not just a story, it's a warning, a mirror, and a promise that no giant is too big for God. To grasp Og's story, we must first step into the shadowed realm of Bashan, a land where cliffs pierced the clouds and ancient trees whispered forgotten names. This was no ordinary kingdom. Bashan was a place of mystery, its basalt caverns and megalithic tombs, known as dolmens, marking it as the domain of the Rephaim, a race of giants whose legend loomed larger than their stature. The Rephaim were not just tall men. They were remnants of an ancient world, tied to tales of the Nephilim and Anakim, beings of divine and demonic lore from Genesis 6. In Ugaritic texts, found in ruins near ancient Israel, the Rephaim appear as warrior spirits, kings of old, whose influence lingered in the land's very stones. Bashan itself was a fortress of both earth and spirit. Its cities, Ashtaroth and Edrei, were not just military strongholds, but centers of idolatry, named for pagan deities like Ashtoreth, goddess of war and fertility. The air was thick with rituals older than memory, and the people of Bashan lived in awe of their king, Og, who seemed to embody the land's primal power. His throne rose atop carved stones, surrounded by altars where incense burned to gods of stone and star. For the people, Og was more than a ruler. He was a living monument, a giant whose presence held back the chaos of the world. They called him the Thunder of the North, the Son of the Watchers, and they believed his strength could defy any foe, even the divine. Yet beneath this pride a warning echoed. Og's father, a giant of the Rephaim, had once told him, "Strength is a gift, but it becomes a curse when it refuses to kneel." The people remembered those words, passed down through generations, but as Og's reign grew, so did his hunger for permanence. He carved roads through mountains, raised fortresses that swallowed the sun, and when wooden beds cracked beneath his weight, he ordered an iron bed, forged not for rest, but to declare his supremacy. The people marveled, their hearts swelling with pride, but in the valleys, whispers began to stir. A new people, Israel, had emerged from the desert slaves turned wanderers, led by a prophet and a pillar of cloud. The people of Bashan laughed, echoing Og's scorn, but the stories of parted seas and fallen empires grew harder to dismiss. Who was Og, this king whose very bed became a relic in Scripture? Deuteronomy 3:11 tells us, "Only Og, king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. His bed was of iron, 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide by the standard cubit. A cubit, roughly 18 inches, makes this bed over 13 feet long and 6 feet wide, a structure too vast for comfort, too heavy for any ordinary man. Was it a bed, a sarcophagus, or a ceremonial platform? Scholars debate, but its size speaks volumes. Og was no mere king. He was a giant in both body and ambition, a symbol of power that seemed untouchable. Archaeology offers clues to Og's stature. The dolmens of Bashan, massive stone tombs still standing today, suggest a people of extraordinary size or status. Good Og have been part of a genetically distinct group, perhaps afflicted with gigantism or descended from a tall warrior caste. Ancient Near Eastern texts describe tribes like the Anakim, known for their height, and even modern science acknowledges that tales of giants may stem from real populations. Whether Og stood 10 feet or taller, his reputation towered higher. To his people, he was the living pillar, a king whose physical might mirrored his unyielding pride. His iron bed displayed in Rabbah of Ammon was not just a resting place but a declaration. Here lies one beyond comparison. Yet this symbol of strength carried a shadow. The people of Bashan, from priests to shepherds, began to hear rumors. Israel, a nation of wanderers, had defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites. They spoke of a God who parted seas, sent plagues, and toppled cities without swords. Og scoffed, raising his goblet on his iron throne, dismissing these desert fanatics, but the people felt a stirring unease. A scout returned one night, dust in his mouth, eyes wide with terror, whispering, "They march and sing." The people saw Og force a smile, but something shifted, a tightness in his gaze, a tremor beneath his armor. The giant who had never known fear was beginning to feel the weight of something eternal. The clash at Edrei was no ordinary battle. Israel, fresh from their victory over Sihon, stood at the edge of the Promised Land, facing a king whose name alone could stop hearts. Bashan's fortified cities, with walls of basalt and gates of iron, seemed impregnable. The people of Bashan stood behind Og, their warriors thousands strong, shields gleaming like waves of iron across the valley. Yet, no cheers rose from their ranks, for Israel approached not with war drums or chariots, but with silence, a silence that carried the weight of worship. The night before, the people had watched their king grow restless. The skies over Bashan darkened, the winds turned sharp, and even the animals fled the hills. From Israel's camp came no clash of steel, only songs rising like incense. A captain reported, "They don't sharpen swords, they pray." The people felt the air grow heavy, not with smoke, but with a presence they could not name. O stood alone on the fortress walls, his great sword in hand, staring east. The people whispered, "What army fights with songs? What god makes darkness thinner near their tents?" For the first time, they saw their king falter, his goblet unsteady, his iron bed no longer a monument, but a cold weight. At dawn, the sun rose like a blade, splitting the sky. The people stood with Og at Edrei's gates, watching Israel's line advance steady, fearless without trumpets. Then came their voices, not cries of war, but hymns of faith, rolling like thunder beneath the earth. A priest gasped, "Heaven watches." The people felt it, a trembling in the stone, a heaviness in the air, not from numbers but from holiness. Og raised his sword, longer than a man, but it resisted him as if it no longer belonged. His strength, once unshakable, betrayed him. The people saw Joshua, Israel's leader, step forward alone, staff in hand, his silence louder than any command. God had spoken to Moses, "Do not fear him, for I have delivered him into your hands." The people of Bashan, watching their king, felt that promise press against their hearts. The battle was swift and silent, no spears flew, no walls crumbled by force, yet Og fell, not to swords, but to a divine weight. His sons, his army, his cities, 60 fortified strongholds fell to Israel, leaving no survivors. The people of Bashan stood stunned, their giant king gone, his sword in the dust, his throne a shadow. This was no mere victory, it was a miracle, a sign that no giant, no fortress could stand against the God of Israel. When the dust settled, Bashan was no more. Its cities, once proud, were divided among Israel's tribes, the fertile lands given to the half-tribe of Manasseh. The oak forests and rich pastures became a new home, but the name Bashan lingered, a symbol of strength and struggle. The people of Bashan scattered, their legacy dissolving not in fire, but in silence. The dolmens remained, silent witnesses to a kingdom lost, and the region near Mount Hermon, steeped in ancient tales of fallen angels, carried a spiritual weight that echoed through the ages. Centuries later, poets would sing of the strong bulls of Bashan, a nod to the land's lingering resistance. The people who once revered Og now vanished, their altars cold, their fortresses ruins. Yet one relic endured, Og's iron bed, 13 feet long, left untouched in rubber. It was not taken as a trophy, but left as a warning, a monument not to power, but to pride's end. The people of Israel passed through Bashan with reverence, heads bowed, knowing this was not their glory, but God's judgment. The land itself seemed to breathe again, as if the weight of arrogance had lifted, the skies clearing, the animals returning. Og was more than a king. He was a symbol, a towering embodiment of pride, rebellion, and defiance. His fall was not just a battle won, but a declaration. No force, no giant, no stronghold can stand against God's purpose. To the Israelites, Og's defeat was a promise fulfilled, a sign that the promised land was theirs, no matter the opposition. To us, it's a mirror reflecting the giants we face, fear, doubt, ambition, control, that seem too big to overcome. Scripture uses giants like Og and Goliath to show the futility of trusting in human strength. Og's iron bed, preserved in Deuteronomy, is not a trophy of his greatness, but a relic of his ruin, a reminder that pride builds nothing eternal. His fall echoes forward to Christ's victory, where the powers of darkness were defeated not by might, but by the cross. Og's story is a shadow of that greater triumph, a sign that God fights for his people, humbling the mighty with a single breath. The people of Bashan saw their king as divine, but when God moved, their iron crumbled, their giant fell. This is the lesson of Bashan. What we build without God, no matter how strong, will not stand. The silence that followed Og's fall was not empty. It was holy, filled with the presence of the one who rules forever. The tale of Og, king of Bashan, is no mere footnote in history. It's a saga of faith confronting fear, of divine power overcoming human pride. His iron bed, his shattered cities, his fallen sword all stand as warnings. No giant is too tall, no throne too high when God steps onto the field. For the people of Bashan, Og was their strength, their symbol, their God. But when the God of Israel arrived, their world changed forever. Today, we all face giants' challenges that loom large, fears that feel unconquerable. But the God who brought down Og walks with us still. His power is not in swords or strategies, but in faith, in worship, in the unseen weight of holiness. So, what giants are you facing? What iron beds have you built, trusting in your own strength? The story of Bashan reminds us, surrender pride, trust God, and no obstacle is too great. If this journey through the ruins of Bashan stirred your heart, share this story with others. Reflect on the giants in your life and the God who overcomes them. The last giant fell, but his lesson endures. Only God stands forever. And when the silence falls, his voice is all that remains.